In this next video, we're going to talk about the slope of a line. So, I did briefly mention in previous videos slope of a line. The slope of a line is the incline. It's how steep something is. In Utah in particular, you'll have seen the signs that say this is a 8% grade, 10% grade, 15% grade. That means that the incline of the road is that steep, and that's actually giving you the slope. Slope and incline are the same thing. Now when we're talking about equations and graphs and coordinates, the slope is the change. It's saying how far down did I go for how far left or right I went, or up. So it's the change in the y, so that how far up or down, divided by the change in the x, or how far left and right. And that's going to give us m, or slope. Okay, so if we have 2 points, we can use this equation, that m equals y2 minus y1 divided by x2 minus x1, where x1, y1 is a point, and x2, y2 is a point on our graph. And notice it says here that x2 cannot equal x1. Well, what would happen if they did? If these two values were the same, say 3 minus 3, I'd get 0 in the denominator, and I can't divide by 0. So that's why this little statement is here. If I try to divide by 0, I don't get a real number answer. That's what we call undefined. So let's go ahead and try one. If it helps you, go ahead and label this is x1 and y1, x2, y2. Now, my question is, do you think it matters which point I label as 1 or 2? The answer is no, it doesn't matter. It does not matter if I started with this point or if I started with that point. It'll just make the signs change, but they'll all change. So both the numerator and denominator, the signs will change. So if it went from positive to negative, now it's going to be negative to positive, which at the end of the day is going to end up being the same. So the signs will work themselves out. So it doesn't matter if I'm starting here and I go down and right, or if I start down here and I go up and back. At the end, I have a negative slope. So whichever point starts first, it's going to either stay a negative slope or stay a positive slope, and the negatives will work themselves out. So let's try this. So m, the slope, will equal y2 minus y1 divided by x2 minus x1. Now be very careful that you don't lose your signs. So I see it all the time. I am subtracting, oops, I didn't mean to move that. I am subtracting a negative number. So there's 2 negative signs here. And what happens with that is when I subtract a negative, I end up adding. The opposite of a negative is a positive. Right? So now 3 minus 1 is 2. 2 plus 1 is 3. So the slope of that line that passes through those points, is, sorry, I keep moving these lines around, 2/3. That's saying for every rise of 2, I'm going to go right 3. So I'd rise up 2, go right 3. Rise up 2, go right 3. That's a slope. It's the incline. Rise over run. You might have heard that before. Alright, let's look at this next one. So, again, does not matter which point I start with, as long as I keep, if I say this is x1, then this has to be y1. The 1's have to stay together, the 2's have to stay together in the same point. But otherwise, it does not matter which point you start with as 0.1 or 0.2. So again, slope y2 minus y1 divided by x2 minus x1. So negative 1 minus 6 ends up negative 7. And then 2 minus negative 1. So again, subtracting a negative, that makes a positive. So 2 plus 1 ends up being 3. It also doesn't matter where your negative sign ends up. So I could write the negative out front. So it's a negative 7/3. Or I could say negative 7 divided by 3, which a negative divided by positive will end up negative overall. Or I could say positive 7 divided by negative 3. Because again, positive divided by negative is going to end up negative overall. Alright. In this next example, we're going to see some funny things happen and then talk about why they happened. So, again, I'm just going to label, it doesn't matter which one's which. Let's start here. Let's say this is x1 and y1. This is x2, y2. So, slope equals rise over run. So the rise is the y values, because that's on the y-axis. So how far did it rise? So y2 minus y1 minus a negative number over x2 minus x1. So there's lots of negatives going on here. Make sure you don't lose them. So y2 minus a negative number. x2 minus a negative number. So 2 minus a negative 1 is the same thing as 2 plus 1. And negative 3 minus a negative 3, again subtracting a negative, becomes plus 3. 2 plus 1 is 3. And negative 3 plus 3 is 0. Well, what did I say about that? I said we can't divide by 0. So this is undefined. The slope is called undefined. Let me write it out better here. Undefined. So why can't I divide by 0? Well, division and multiplication are inverses, right? So I should be able to check my division with multiplication. So if I said 12 divided by 2, that's going to give me 6. And I can check that by working backwards and saying 6 times 2 gives me what I started with of that 12. Well, if I try to put a number here, if I tried to say 0, 0 times 0 is not 3. If I try to put 3 here, 3 times 0 is not 3. There's no number I can put here that when I multiply by 0 is going to give me 3. It's always going to be 0. Anything times 0 is 0. So that's why the slope is undefined. Now, what does this undefined slope suggest about the line? Well, looking at these points, we see that the x's are repeating. So if I were to graph this, I would go back 3, up 2. And then I'd go back 3, down 1. I'm going to end up getting a vertical line through x at negative 3. So if I have an undefined slope, it is representing a vertical line. Vertical lines have undefined slopes. Alright, let's look at this next one. So I'm not going to label it, but let's just try. M equals, I'm going to use this as 0.1 and that as 0.2. y2 minus y1 divided by x2 minus x1. 6 minus 6 is 0. 2 minus 1 is 1. So these are different. be careful. This is not undefined. This slope is 0. I can take 0 and divide it by 1 and get 0. Right? This is a real number answer. And looking at the 2 points I had here, the y values are being repeated, which means I would go over 1 up 6, over 1 up 6, and I'm going to end up with a horizontal line through y equals 6. So horizontal lines have a slope of 0. Vertical lines have an undefined slope. Alright, I got 2 more examples here. So here I'm given a graph and I'm asked to find the slope. Remember, I just need 2 points and I can find the slope. So I need 2 nice points on this graph. I can pick any 2 nice points I want because the incline is steady. It's the same the whole way down. It's not changing. So I'm going to pick this point. So that looks like a nice one. And this point. So that looks like a nice one. But I could pick anything. I could pick here, here, any nice point. Now, I can do this one of 2 ways. I can identify these points and use the slope equation, or I can just look at this picture and identify what's happening. Because slope is rise over run. Right? It's the change in y values divided by the change in x values. So if I started at this point and I want to get to that point, I have to do rise over run. So the rise. So how far up and down do I have to go to get to the next point? So from here to there, it's actually a decline. I'm going down 2. So my rise was -2. My run, so from this point to that point, again, is how far left and right. I have to go over 1 in the positive direction. So +1, or just 1. So my slope of this line is -2. Again, I could use the points. I could have said, okay, this first point is -1, up 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And the next point was 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. And I'm going to get the same answer if I use the slope equation of y2 minus y1 divided by x2 minus x1. Now, if I had picked another point, say I picked this one and that one down here. It looks like I'm going to get different values, but I'm not. I'm going to get the exact same thing. I just have to simplify. So to get from this point to that point, I'm going to do it again with these other points to show you it's the same. The rise here, so from here down, the rise is how far down did I go? I went 1, 2, 3, 4. So I went down 4. The run is how far right or left I go. So from here to there, I have to go +2. Now this looks different again, but it's not simplified. So -4 divided by +2 is -2. We get the same thing. So it does not matter which points you use. It does not matter which point you start with. As long as you're simplifying your slope, the incline is constant. It stays at that same incline the whole way down.
Alright, we have one more here, and in this one we have half of a point, a whole point, and we know the slope. So we are given the slope in this problem, and we have to find that missing y coordinate. As we know, the slope equation of slope is y2 minus y1 divided by x2 minus x1. We will just fill in every piece of that we know and leave the piece that we don't know as the variable. So here's the equation, and we're going to fill in what we do know. We do know the slope is -1/4. so we know m, and I'm going to call this x1, y1, x2, y2. So y2 is going to be negative 9 minus y1, which that's the piece we don't know, it stays a variable, divided by x2 minus x1. So now we have this equation that we can solve for y. So I'm going to start by just simply subtracting in the denominator here. I'm going to leave that 1/4 alone, and I still have that negative 9 minus y, and 16 minus 8 is 8. Now I want to get y alone, so I need to get rid of this dividing by 8. The opposite of dividing is multiplying. I'm going to multiply both sides by 8, and same thing over here. On the right hand side, if I multiply by 8 and divide by 8, those divide out, and I'm simply left with the numerator, which is negative 9 minus y. On the left hand side, I can put that 8 over 1 and divide out a 4. So if I divide out a 4, I'd be left with 2. So I have a negative 1 times 2, so I get negative 2. And then I still want to get y alone, so I have to get rid of that constant here. So the opposite of minus 9 is plus 9 to both sides of my equation. Whoops. Yeah, that was right. And that's gone. So now I have 9 minus 2, or 7, equaling a negative y. Y is not quite alone. I still have to divide by negative 1 on both sides. So positive 7 divided by negative 1 should end up negative 7, equaling y. And there you have it.